Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series of the Life Divine with our beloved Ranga. We are continuing in the chapter Progress to Knowledge, God, Man, and Nature. And we're on page 718. This is not to say.
The very first sentence, this is not to say. So we have to know what he has said.
Yes, yes.
So I'll read the summary of the previous para. Okay. Basically, he has said that there are three principles which are to be viewed as a whole: God, nature, and man. The transcendent, the cosmic, and the individual. And then he has also said there that all of them are dependent on each other. Okay? But then that raises a question. Does the divine depend upon the cosmos? He has himself created the cosmos. How can he depend on the cosmos? How can he depend on the individual? But you have to understand it in the right way. Okay? So it's interesting. You can't put this into words, but still, with some stretch of imagination, you can imagine. The divine is infinitely creative. You can't deny creation to him. If you deny creation to him, then he is not God.
Yes.
So he has got creation.
Very, very true.
Now, that creation, he is also infinite. So
Exactly.
he must have infinite creative power.
Yes.
Now, if he has got infinite creative power, is it not true in a certain sense that he is obliged to create?
We would have to admit that. Yes, we have to admit that.
Yes.
Yes.
So, if he is obliged to create, obliged in double quotes, he is not obliged at all.
Right.
But since he is creative and infinite creation, can he hold back the creative capacity in himself without creating? Yes, that is possible, and that is his aspect of the transcendent. But you can also imagine that he is obliged to. Okay.
Yes, because and can he back off from it?
Yes, that's the thing. Okay. So in the synthesis of yoga, Srila says something very interesting, and all these are things that you have to put into proper perspective. Your tablet has come. Give it away now. He's got the book now. So, he says that just as much as man wants the divine also wants man. So, there's some sort of relationship between the two which is unbreakable. So, that is what he's going to discuss here. Okay? So, it is certainly not true that the divine can exist without the individual. He can exist without the individual. That's a transcendent aspect. Yes. But there is also the aspect of the cosmos and there is the aspect of the individual. So that is what he is. So I am reading the summary of the previous one. Okay. Man has to realize that all the three, transcendent, cosmic, and individual, or as he has entitled the chapter, God, Man, and Nature. Okay? So, man has to realize that all the three are really one. Each cannot be complete without the other two. Only when all three are understood as the three in one can each be known in its separate completeness. Oneness of all three is a complete knowledge. Without that, man will perceive only division, separation, multiplicity. To understand himself, he must also understand God and the universe. Similarly, each must be understood in relation to the other two. So this is what he said in the previous para. So you may be, if he leaves it at that, you will feel that, oh, the divine is obliged to create man and the cosmos. It is not like that. Okay, that's what he is going to tell us now. So, this, I am reading the para we have to read today. This is not to say that the Supreme is not self-existent and self-sufficient. Okay? He is self-existent and self-sufficient. God exists in Himself and not by virtue of the cosmos or of man, while man and cosmos exist by virtue of God and not in themselves, except in so far as their being is one with the being of God. So, we have to understand Himself and understand the word. God exists in Himself. In other words, He exists in Himself. There is a status where He exists by Himself, but not in the universe. He exists also in the universe. He also exists in the man. But there is one status where He exists in Himself only, and that's the transcendent. When human beings have the experience of the transcendent, they feel that the universe is non-existent. It is almost an illusion. So that's the experience that we have. It is the divine who has put away his power of creativity. He is concentrating only on himself, somewhat like a black hole. Okay. Everything is in him. He doesn't need anything else. So, God exists in himself and not by virtue of the cosmos or of man, while man and cosmos exist by virtue of God and not in themselves, except in so far as their being is one with the being of God. So, Srila is saying that the individual cannot exist without God. The cosmos cannot exist without God. But God can exist without both of them. Can. And there is a state. The transcendent is exactly that state. Okay? So, but still, they are a manifestation of the power of God. And even in His eternal existence, their spiritual reality must in some way be present or implied. Okay? Since otherwise, there would be no possibility of their manifestation, or manifested, they would have no significance. Now let's look at the sentence carefully again. But still, they are a manifestation. Who are the they? Man and cosmos. Okay? They are still a manifestation of the power of God. Okay? The power of God has created cosmos. And even in His eternal existence, that means the transcendent, their spiritual reality must in some way be present or implied, since otherwise there would be no possibility of the manifestation, or manifested, they would have no significance. To understand what he is saying here, the best way is to take the image of the tree and the seed. The seed is the transcendent. There is no sign of leaves and fruits and flowers in the, so that's a transcendent. But does that seed not contain in essence the tree? It does. That's what he's saying. So exactly as the tree exists in subtle form in the seed, the transcendent also contains in itself, without any outward sign, of the cosmos and man. That's what he's saying. Okay? So I read that sentence again with this context. But still, they, cosmos and man, are a manifestation of the power of God, and even in His eternal existence, which is the transcendent, their spiritual reality must in some way be present or implied. And since otherwise there would be no possibility of their manifestation. Okay, granted that there is manifestation, or manifested, they would have no significance.
So how could they be manifested?
So
without the divine?
Yeah. He's saying that is not possible actually. That's what he's saying.
It's not possible.
He's saying that if they didn't exist in him, and somehow it happened that there is a manifestation, it will have no significance at all. And that is exactly what human beings in their ignorance say. The world is by itself, it has come into existence. There is no significance here. That's what the ignorant men say. It is just a cycle, it's an eternal cycle of creation, destruction, no goal, no significance, nothing here. How it came into existence? Don't ask me, I don't know. Okay. So, So he's saying it will be without significance. So, what appears here as man is an individual being of the divine. The divine extended in multiplicity is the self of all individual existences. Now there is a footnote there, we'll see the footnote.
Yes.
Okay. Eko vashi sarvabhutana sarvabhutantaratma, from the Katha Upanishad. So, he says that there is one. Okay. So, everything Eko vashi, he is the controller of all the multiplicity that has come. Okay, so we go back to our sentence. What appears here as man, as an individual being of the divine,
is an individual.
What appears here as man is an individual being of the divine. The divine, now that's interesting. What he's saying, what appears here as man is an individual being of the divine. So, the divine has got two aspects, an individual aspect and also a universal aspect. So, the universal aspect is quite capable of creating an individual form. You are the individual form, I am an individual form, a cat is an individual form, a dog is an individual form. That's what basically he is saying. Okay, so is self of all existence. Moreover, it is through the knowledge of self and the world that man arrives at the knowledge of God, and he cannot attain to it otherwise. So, man cannot directly know the divine. He has to go through himself, and finally he has to go through the cosmos. He can't leap into the divine without the individual and the cosmos. That's what he's saying. Double promotion not possible. So in other words, he has to realize himself first, that's a psychic being. Then he has to realize the Brahman in the cosmos, and then only he can reach the divine, the third level.
And later on he speaks of how long a journey it is.
Okay, so moreover, it is through the knowledge of self and the world that man arrives at the knowledge of God, and he cannot attain to it otherwise. He has to go through himself and he has to go through the cosmos to go to the divine. It is not by rejecting God's manifestation, but by rejecting his own ignorance of it and the results of his ignorance that he can best lift up and offer the whole of his being and consciousness and energy and joy of being into the divine existence. Now this sentence is a direct contradiction of the Mayavada philosophy. They say the world, I don't need the world, I'll go to the divine straight away. But you are not going to the divine straight away, you are going to the cosmic aspect. You are going to only to the second level. But similarly speaking of the third level, God, the transcendent God, you have to go through yourself first and then through the cosmos. Okay, so it is not by rejecting God's manifestation. And who is doing that? The Buddhist is doing that, and the Mayavadan is doing that. Okay, so, but by rejecting his own ignorance of it and the results of his ignorance that he can best lift up and offer the whole of his being and consciousness and energy. Now note again interestingly, being, consciousness, energy and joy. Again you are going back to Satchidananda. Okay? So being, Sat, consciousness, Chit, energy, Shakti and joy, Ananda. Okay? So constantly you will refer all his writings, he always refers back to the Satchidananda, all the four aspects. Okay, so joy being into the divine existence. He may do this through himself. That's a bhakti path, the path of devotion, bhakti path, by realizing the divine within yourself. Okay? It is possible for him, he may do this through himself, one manifestation, or he may do it through the universe. Okay? Another manifestation. So if he does it through himself, it's a bhakti path, and if he does it through the universe, it is usually the knowledge path. Okay, so one manifestation. So there are different manifestations. Or he may do it through the universe, another manifestation. Arriving through himself alone, it is possible for him to plunge into an individual emergence or absorption in the indefinable and to lose the universe. So, in the bhakti path, the universe doesn't come into the picture. You have a direct relation with the divine. That's what he's saying. Okay? And you do that by love and devotion. That's one path. Arriving through the universe alone, he can sink his individuality either in the impersonality of universal being or in a dynamic self of universal conscious force. Now, that's the other path. So when you go through the universe, you go to the Brahman consciousness. You go to the self. Arriving through the universe alone, he can sink his individuality. His individuality, you have to understand in the right way, your ego disappears. At present, our individuality, we confuse it with ego. Even the Buddhists to a certain extent do that. When they say the individuality is effaced, they actually mean the ego is effaced. But there is an individuality which is independent of the ego. Individuality and ego are not the same. There is slight difference. What is that difference? Again, we give that famous example of the salt. Okay? The salt is an individual form. You can think of it as the ego. Take that and universalize it, put it into water. Okay. The salt piece has disappeared, but the saltiness is everywhere. The saltiness everywhere is the true individual, and the piece of salt is the ego. That has disappeared. But the universal individuality is there. So there is a difference between individuality and the ego. Okay? That's what he's saying. He's saying, arriving through the universal alone, that is the path of the knowledge path, he can sink his individuality either in the impersonality of universal being or in a dynamic self of universal conscious force. Now that's also interesting, because when you experience the infinite and you come back into your normal, you remember the experience. So now the question arises, who had that experience? If the individuality disappeared, you wouldn't remember. But you remember that you had that experience. So somebody had the experience. That's a true individuality. But there is the Buddhist path, which is even that individuality disappears. You go into the infinite, the shunyam, and disappear forever. That also is possible. Okay. So all this small depends on which experience you have had of the divine. So, arriving through the universe alone, he can sink his individuality either in the impersonality of universal being or in a dynamic self of universal conscious force. Now, what's the difference between the two? In the impersonality of universal being, you become the universe. Okay? Your consciousness becomes vast and but or simply saying, in a dynamic self of universal conscious force. The second thing is that you feel yourself to be one with everybody, that the universe has not disappeared. I can feel myself to be you, I can feel myself to be you. That is one experience, that's the second part. He said dynamic self. But in the other one, which is passive, all those things don't exist. You yourself have become the universal. So many different types of experiences are possible. Okay, so otherwise Srimad would use the word or. The first one is the sink the individuality either in the impersonality of universal being or in a dynamic self of universal conscious force. He emerges. Who is the he? Man. He emerges into the universal self.
I have he merges. He merges.
Oh, acha. I have merges.
Merges, yes.
I said emerge.
You said emerges.
Oh, acha. He merges into the universal self, or he becomes an impersonal channel of the cosmic energy. Okay, so again, same thing in different words. Arriving through the equal integrality of both the individual and the cosmos, and seizing through them and beyond them on all the aspects of the divine, he exceeds both and fulfills them in that exceeding. The third one, what he is talking about now, is the supramental level, the third level. The first level is the individual, the second level is the cosmic, and the third level is the supermind, where you include the cosmos and the individuality in yourself. If you have only the individual realization of the divine, the universe doesn't exist for you. If you have the cosmic existence, the individuality has disappeared. But if you go to the third level, all the three exist for you. That's what he's saying. Okay? Exceeds both and fulfills them in that exceeding. What does it mean, fulfills them? That means you understand the necessity of the individual life and you find that there is a purpose to it. That's a fulfillment. The individual also, this universe also, is not a by chance creation without any meaning. There is a meaning, and that's a fulfillment. You understand why it has been created. Okay, so he exceeds both and fulfills them in that exceeding. Srila very often uses the word fulfill. So you must understand what that means. It means the purpose for which you were created, that thing was created, is fulfilled. That's what he means by fulfill. Okay. So it's interesting. The fulfillment of the body will be when there is no disease and when there is no death. The fulfillment of the vital will be when you, what does the vital want? The vital wants always enjoyment, possession and power.
Power.
You will get all the three without desire and without any expectation. That's a fulfillment of the vital. What does the mind want? Mind wants knowledge, infinite knowledge. It can, when the mind gets infinite knowledge, that is a fulfillment of the mind. So there is a fulfillment for all the three, at the individual level and the cosmic level. That's what he means. And that's exactly what Srila wants. If you can reach the supermind, the third level, otherwise you can't. You go to second level, you feel that you have realized the divine, but that's only one aspect. Okay, so you are rejecting the physical world. Okay, so even as he exceeds both and fulfills them in that exceeding. He possesses the divine in his being, even as he is enveloped, penetrated, pervaded, possessed by the divine being. Divine being, consciousness, light, power, delight, knowledge. So again you can see the divine being, Sat, consciousness, Chit, light,
Ananda.
Again consciousness, another word for consciousness, power, Shakti, delight, Ananda. Knowledge is also part of the light and consciousness. He possesses God in himself and God in the universe. When you go to the third level, you actually you possess God. So what does that mean? And possess the universe? When you possess something, you are master of that. Okay? I possess this tablet. I can do what I want with it. I have the power over it. So you possess the universe, you have power over the universe. Srila was using that power to fix events in the world, if you remember. Second World War, in Russia, in Turkey, he was making so many experiments. You are the Samrat. You are the Swarat and you are the Samrat. Samrat means the emperor. You are king of the universe. That's what he's meaning. He possesses God in himself and God in the universe. The all knowledge justifies to him its creation of himself and justifies by him perfected its creation of the world it has made. That's what he means by fulfillment. When you possess this, you go to the supramental level, you understand the purpose of the universe and you understand the purpose of individual creation also. Otherwise it's a mystery. Okay, so all this becomes entirely real and effective by an ascension into the supramental and supreme supernature. So note the word supreme supernature and its descent of its powers into the manifestation. But even while that consummation is still difficult and distant, the true knowledge can be made subjectively real by spiritual reflection or reception in mind, life, body, nature. So what he means is that even without climbing permanently into the supermind, a reflection of it can be experienced here. Now that's very interesting, because even if you are in the higher mind level, touches of those things can come into you in flashes. Okay? It's a reflection, it's not the truth. It's not the whole truth, but it's a reflection. So you come to know, even at that level, what the supermind represents.
But not in the ignorance.
Pardon?
Not in the ignorance. You
Not
can't get that reflection in the ignorance.
In the ignorance, it's not possible.
No. No.
Because there you are in total darkness.
Right.
But sometimes intuition can work to a certain extent. But the intuition is not the highest plane. We have many examples of intuition in the physical world. Einstein's theory of relativity is definitely intuition, no doubt about it. A normal man can't think of it. It comes like a drop of light into the mind. Okay. The other example also is even gravitation. That also could be an intuition. Otherwise you just think it's natural for the apple to fall. But here the intuition, no, this is only a one-way track, so there must be something to it. So and the best example of that is also that mathematician, in the Indian mathematician, Ramanujan. He used to get all these formulas directly. And when his mentor, I forget his name now, he wanted proof of the equations he was giving. He said, I can't give you proof. It's above the mind. So it's above the mind. And now it has been proved that all his equations were right. So that's intuition. He used to openly say that it is Saraswati who is giving me all this knowledge. Okay? So that's what he's saying. So can be made. Now, that last bit is very interesting. He is telling us very clearly that even when you are in the lower planes of consciousness, reflections of that can come into this. You can get glimpses of it. Okay? The supreme supernature is the descent of its powers into manifestation. But even while, he started the word with but even while that consummation is still difficult and distant, the consummation has not come. The true knowledge can be made subjectively real, not objectively, not practically, but subjectively real by spiritual reflection or reception in mind, life, body, nature. Now, again he has used two words, spiritual reflection or reception. What's the difference? Spiritual reflection, it gets reflected. But when it is received, you possess it. It may be for a short while. So, how interesting some of those language is, we have to see. How such subtle differences he brings out. He's just adding one word or, okay? Spiritual reflection or reception. You are being able to receive it and hold it for some time. But the other one is just a reflection and goes away. Okay, so this is what Swami is saying. So
but
what is
he says here the reflection can be in mind and body and life.
Body, doubtful.
Mind, life, body, nature.
That's a nature. He means the nature. Reflection and reception in mind, life, body, which is nature. Okay. Mind, life, body, nature. You can have that. Yeah, probably even the body can feel it.
Yeah.
The body can feel the Ananda. In fact, there is a Ramakrishna's description is there in many interesting ways, how this, the power that comes into the body can have different. It can be like the feeling of an ant, he says. Okay? You will feel it in the nerves going like that. Or you can feel it like a big wave that's coming into you. So there are many. Or you can feel it like a jumping. So there are all these different types of experiences are possible. It can be power, it can be Ananda, it can be consciousness, it can be so many things. So he has said so many things in this para. We will have a look at it in the summary. Okay, so very interesting para. What we have stated in the previous para may seem to imply that God depends on man and the universe. But this is not so. God is self-sufficient to himself and needs nothing else. Whereas man and cosmos both need God and cannot exist without him. That's the first sentence itself. This is not to say. So that's what it is. Next, still, the unity of all three implies that even when God seems to stand alone, man and cosmos are secretly, inherently present in him. Otherwise, they could never be manifested, seemingly outside and independent of him. So they must already exist in him. Okay. Let us note that man only, when he knows himself and cosmos, can know God. God cannot be known by rejection of the cosmos, Mayavada, or by rejection of the individual, Buddhism. So you can't know him directly. You have to go through the individual and you have to go through the, only then you will come to know God integrally. Otherwise you will have only one aspect of him. Yeah. When man knows himself fully, he can merge exclusively into God, and the universe need not exist for him then. This is the bhakti path. By devotion. You have a relation with the divine, the world doesn't exist. It's only you and the divine. Okay. Bhakti path. Personality aspect. When man knows the universe fully, he can merge himself completely into impersonality and become an agent of the universal force, consciousness, etc. There is then no individuality. That's a knowledge path. The Jnana Yoga and the Bhakti Yoga. He has not mentioned that, but that's what it means. Now, in this, personality and impersonality can be experienced separately, but they must also be experienced simultaneously. Okay? But this is not possible, but this is possible only in the supramental gnosis. Okay? So, in the supermind, man transcends his outer nature as well as the cosmos and gets the benefit of both personal and impersonal aspects. He experiences the harmony of both not as sums but as integrally the same. Man then possesses God as God possesses the universe. This is the final stage of the spiritual journey of man. Of course, in a sense, there is no end to the evolutionary ascent. So this is what he has said in this para. Now we go to the next para. But this spiritual truth and true aim of his being is not allowed to appear till late in his journey. So, Srimdo has gone there and he knows, that's why he is telling us. But if you are only at the individual level or the cosmic level, this truth will not be known to you. What is that truth? You have to go to the supermind. Then all have a meaning. The universe has a meaning and the individual has a meaning. If you don't go there, if you go only through the individual path, then the universe has no meaning for you. If you go through the universe, which is the knowledge path, the individuality has no importance. So you go there only, then you understand. That's what it is. But this spiritual truth and true aim of his being is not allowed to appear till late in his journey. For the early preparatory business of man in the evolutionary steps of nature is to affirm, to make distinct and rich, to possess firmly, powerfully and completely his own individuality. As a consequence, he has in the beginning principally to occupy himself with his own ego. In this egoistic phase of his evolution, the world and others are less important to him than himself, are indeed only important as aids and occasions for his self-affirmation. God too at this stage is less important to him than he is to himself, and therefore in earlier formations, on the lower levels of religious development, God or the gods are treated as if they existed for man, okay, as supreme instruments for the satisfaction of his desires, his helpers, and his task of getting the world in which he lives to satisfy his needs and wants and ambitions. This primary egoistic development, with all its sins and violences and crudities, is by no means to be regarded in its proper place as an evil or an error of nature. It is necessary for man's first work, the finding of his own individuality and its perfect disengagement from the lower subconscious, in which the individual is overpowered by the mass consciousness of the world and entirely subject to the mechanical workings of nature. Man, the individual, has to affirm, to distinguish his personality against nature, to be powerfully himself, to evolve all his human capacities of force and knowledge and enjoyment, so that he may turn them upon her and upon the world with more and more mastery and force. His self-discriminating egoism is given him as a means for this primary purpose. Until he has thus developed his individuality, his personality, his separate capacity, he cannot be fit for the greater work before him, or successfully turn his faculties to higher, larger and more divine ends. He has to affirm himself in the ignorance, and before he can perfect himself in the knowledge. So,
it's so powerful, very powerful.
Very interesting para, where he is telling you that ignorance is not to be considered an evil. It has got its own purpose, and you have to develop yourself. I cannot become a rocket scientist without going through the preliminary knowledge. I have to build myself, I have to prepare myself for that. Okay? So that's what he's basically saying. So he has told us that you cannot know God without knowing the individual and without knowing the cosmos. Now he is taking up first if you want to know yourself, you have to develop yourself. You have to develop yourself, and that means you have to be a little egoistic. You have the capacity to concentrate on yourself and develop yourself. So ego is necessary. And if ego is necessary, I have to assert myself against you. So then enmity comes up, sometimes hatred can come up. Okay? So this is what he is saying, that it has got a purpose.
And Mother says, ego brought you here.
Yes, that's right. So, exactly. So you need to develop yourself in that way first. That's what he's saying. Ego has a purpose. Nothing that is created by the divine, even in the lower planes, is meaningless. It is not meaningless. It's got a meaning. He is not saying that it is the best, not at all. But you have to go through that to build yourself. Okay, so. I read a summary?
Yes.
Yeah. But this supramental consummation, going to the third level, cannot come to him except at the very end of his spiritual quest. He must learn to know himself first, become master of himself. He has to learn to assert himself as an individual, as a distinct individual, as opposed to a vague, indeterminate existence in the vast impersonality of universe, of infinite nature. The animal is not aware of itself. The individuality has not developed yet. Many men at the normal level also are at that level. That sense of individuality is not there. So ego, when people are very egoistic, you may say, oh, it's very bad. Not at all. He is developing himself at that level. At that level, there is a purpose. But if you see it from a higher point of view, it is a defect and you have to get rid of that. But first you have to develop that, then only you can go up. So, as opposed to a vague, indeterminate existence in the vast impersonality of infinite nature. For this, nature gives him an ego. Develop yourself. A natural replacement for the true individuality. The ego is a distorted individuality. It is given to him. It's got a meaning. In this period of egoistic development, he is most important to himself. The world and God seem to exist for his personal benefit. This egoistic life has its sins and violences and crudities. But this period is not to be despised as an aberration of nature. It's a very necessary step to build himself, discover his unique individuality, assert himself, and not let himself be blown about like a leaf in the wind and every wind. He must learn to stand his ground, be himself, and be master of himself and the world. You will see very often there is a French word, phrase, mouton de panurge. Okay? That means if you are in a group and you don't have an individuality, the group says, today let's go for a picnic. So the man who is usually not yet developed himself, yes, we'll do whatever others are doing. You follow. Okay? But the man who has got an individuality says, no, I've got something else to do. I don't want to go there. So you have to develop your individuality and not go along with the crowd just like a leaf in the wind. So ego is very necessary. In fact, that's why you will see that very developed persons are not very easy to deal with. They often have a will of their own. Okay. So that's what Swami is saying. Okay. So the egoistic life has its sins and violences and crudities. But this period is not to be despised as an aberration of nature. It is very necessary, it's a very necessary step to build himself, discover his unique individuality, assert himself, and not let himself be blown about like a leaf in any and every wind. He must learn to stand his ground, be himself, and be master of himself and the world. This is what he said in this para. He must affirm himself in the ignorance before he can perfect himself in the knowledge. For the initiation of the evolutionary emergence from the inconscient works out by two forces, a secret cosmic consciousness and an individual consciousness manifest on the surface. We'll read the whole thing, then we'll see. The secret cosmic consciousness remains secret and subliminal to the surface individual. It organizes itself on the surface by the creation of separate objects and beings. But while it organizes the separate object and the body and mind of the individual being, it creates also collective powers of consciousness which are large, subjective formations of cosmic nature. But it does not provide for them an organized mind and body. It bases them on the group of individuals, develops for them a group mind, changing yet continuous group body. It follows that only as the individuals become more and more conscious can the group being also become more and more conscious. The growth of the individual is the indispensable means for the inner growth as distinguished from the outer force and expansion of the collective being. This indeed is the dual importance of the individual, that it is through him that the cosmic spirit organizes its collective units and makes them self-expressive and progressive, and through him that it raises nature from the inconscience to the superconscious and exalts it to meet the transcendent. In the mass, the collective consciousness is near to the inconscient. It has a subconscious, an obscure and mute movement which needs the individual to express it, to bring it to light, to organize it and make it effective. The mass consciousness by itself moves by a vague, half-formed or unformed subliminal and commonly subconscious impulse rising to the surface. It is prone to a blind or half-seeing unanimity which suppresses the individual in the common movement. If it thinks it is by the motto, the slogan, the watchword, the common crude or formed idea, the traditional, the accepted customary notion, it acts when not by instinct or by impulse, then by the rule of the pack, the herd mentality, the type law. This mass consciousness, life, action can be extraordinarily effective if it can find an individual or a few powerful individuals to embody, express, lead, organize it. Its sudden crowd movements can also be irresistible for the moment, like the motion of an avalanche or the rush of a tempest. The suppression or entire subordination of the individual in the mass consciousness can give a great practical efficiency to a nation or a community if the subliminal collective being can build a binding tradition or find a group, a class, a head to embody its spirit and direction. The strength of powerful military states, of communities with a tense and austere culture rigidly imposed on its individuals, the success of the great world conquerors had behind it this secret of nature. But this is an efficiency of the outer life, and that life is not the highest or last term of our being. There is a mind in us, there is a soul and spirit, and our life has no true value if it has not in it a growing consciousness, a developing mind. And if life and mind are not an expression, an instrument, a means of liberation and fulfillment for the soul, the indwelling spirit. Now, this is a very, very interesting para. He is talking of the mass movement and the individual movement. Okay? And he is saying that the mass movement also has got, it acts like unconscious nature. He is comparing it to an avalanche. Okay? So, those people who have got that individual power, they can utilize this mass movement. That's how revolutions come about.
For good or for bad?
Normally it can be for both.
Yes.
It's just that the force is arising. You are using the unconscious force in the common mass of men and pushing it to a certain. It can be both ways.
I'm thinking of Orville when reading this.
It can be both ways. So actually it's a very, very interesting para, and his comparison of that, the mass movement and very interesting. So it will be very interesting to go through, but anyway, what we'll do today is we'll just read the summary and see whether it makes sense. It raises many interesting questions and a lot of discussion can take place. But anyway, so evolution, we can discuss it while I am reading the summary.
Good.
Evolution starts from the inconscience, which is a state of undifferentiated mass of dark unconscious substance. We have to understand this. There is no individuality. It's just a sea of matter. There is no individuality at all. Okay, so.
But there's life. But there is life.
Life comes up next.
Next.
He's talking of the inconscience first. Okay, so. Unconscious substance. From this tenebrous matrix, the rise of life and mind signals the commencement of evolution. So out of the ignorance of the unconscious substance, life comes out and then mind. So evolution has started. The force that compels this emergence is twofold. There is an individual consciousness as well as a large universal consciousness which is at a much lower level than that of the individual. Now, it's very interesting to understand this. We have seen, and we have discussed this earlier also, that all progressive movements are always initiated by the individual. It's not a mass movement that discovers something. It's the individual who discovers. Whether it be a scientific knowledge, or whether it be a philosophical concept, or whether it be a process of yoga, whatever it be, it's the individual who first finds it, and then entire mankind benefits. So, even such a simple thing as the mobile, it's one man who discovered it. Okay? And then everybody is now using it. So, it's the individual who is the pivotal point for the progress of the mass. That's basically what he's saying. Okay? So, why is he saying all this? Because he has told you that the individual has to develop himself, that the individual is necessary. Without the individual perfection, you cannot go to the next. So, he is now telling you first of all the problems of the individual and how the individual is necessary for mass awakening also. Without the individual, the evolution would have been very slow. When man comes into the picture, the evolution can go much faster. Okay, so the force that compels the emergence is twofold. There is an individual consciousness as well as a large universal consciousness which is at a much lower level than that of the individual. So, the individual has a life, a mind and a body with 5 senses, and these help to develop himself. But the collective consciousness has no such organized mind and life, and it is the total sum of all the individuals in a particular group that constitutes the subconscious race awareness. So, there is a social, collective mind level. It's the average of the highest and the lowest. So, obviously, it comes down to the middle level. It's the average. So, it is at a much lower level. That is the reason why when you read, 90% of people who read the newspapers believe what they read. It's only the very discriminating man who says, this news does not seem to be right. Okay, the discrimination comes at a very high level. Otherwise, you accept what is going on. In fact, now that has become a huge problem. Fake news has come in such a big way that you have to constantly use your discrimination. You shouldn't believe anything that comes in. But the mass consciousness believes and moves like a flood or an avalanche, as he says.
And this how I've been studying a lot of World War II, and you can see how the German people in the mass were moved.
That's a very good example of the Nazi movement, which captivated the whole. It was Hitler who was able to tap this mass consciousness and raise it. Very few had the discrimination that this is wrong. Okay, very few. And even if they had it, they didn't have the courage to challenge this mass movement. It was so powerful. That's exactly what Sridhar is saying. He is comparing it to an avalanche or a flood. So, in fact, he has said that the man who is capable of that, he can use this for a revolution. Okay, so the individual has a life, a mind and a body with 5 senses, and these help to develop himself. But the collective consciousness has no such organized mind and life. It is the total sum of all individuals in a particular group that constitutes this subconscious race awareness. It can be a great force, just as an avalanche or a storm, a universal collective force in action. This is the consciousness that rises in revolutions, mass movements, and if a leader can learn to harness this power, it can become a great game-changing factor. That's what Hitler did. So you were asking whether it's good or bad. So in that case, it was very evil, but it went along. Yeah. These are consciousness that rises in revolutions, mass movements, and if a leader can learn to harness this power, it can become a great game-changing factor. Great military generals, mass leaders owe their success to this collective force, which is always qualitatively far below the average individual force and consciousness. That's what he has said.
So we'll
stop here
conclude for today, yes. Namaste, Om. Namaste. And we'll see you again on Monday to continue our chapter in Life Divine.